President Barrow calls for responsibility among citizens in response to the growing number of crimes in the country. United Nations Secretary General has called for de-escalation in the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict. And the syndrome of irregular migrations to Europe is raising concerns in Tunisia. Well, these and more coming your way in the world today. This is Africa TV and you're watching the World Today News Bulletin. I am Amadou Kante and many thanks for joining us, and now the news in detail. Now, as Muslims observe the holy feast of Eid al-Fitr today, President Adama Barrow noted in his address to the nation some of the security lapses that concern his government. The small West African nation is currently exposed to a series of crimes that has instilled fear of security to many, following several reports of killings and other related criminal activities. Sohna Tunkara has more of that in this report.
Crimes such as killing, theft and kidnapping and robbery are noticeably lifting head in the Gambia, especially under the new government. Police have taken the habit of issuing safety tips mainly to save women and children who are the most vulnerable and most victimized in any scenario. Although the issue of organized crime is not prominent in the discourse, it nevertheless presents a serious concern for the public following a noticeable wave of criminal operations, irrespective of the time in the day or night. President Barrow took note of the situation as a threat to the historic perception of Gambia as the smiling coast of Africa.
As we all know, peace and stability form the bedrock for development. It is regretted, therefore, that there have been disturbing reports of domestic violence in our communities and criminal acts of drug abuse, theft, destruction of property, and other forms of crimes. These crimes pose a threat to peace and stability and can hamper our development efforts.
In 2020 alone, for example, more than 10 cases of killings were recorded, as per media reports, some of which remain in police files without resolution, despite various mechanisms implemented by the security sector in coping the current fragile situation. Unfortunate incidents continue to spark public discord across the country. The president opined that his government's efforts are being taken for granted in maintaining the accolade the country is well known for.
In the past 4 years, my government has consistently promoted freedom and other democratic values that would bring back our smiles in a peaceful and stable environment. Unfortunately, some people are taking these values for granted and are conducting themselves in ways that undermine our security. Disregard for the rule of law is disruptive. As a result, I ask all citizens and residents of the country to act responsively in order to advance peace and development.
Critics are of the prediction that criminal activities are likely to occur more frequently than ever before if stringent measures are not enforced. These, according to them, will be partly due to the weak security response to crimes. Police stations are mounted in almost every community in the Gambia. However, they lack the ability to offer a rapid response to crisis due to lack of proper training and equipment, among the list of challenges. For Africa News, Sohna Tunkara.
President Barrow calls for act of responsibility among Gambians as he addressed the nation in observance of the Eid al-Fitr celebration. Now, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Wednesday called for de-escalation in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine. Now, more than 50 Palestinians, including children, are reported dead since the launch of multiple strikes with fighter jets by the Israel's Air Force, targeting what it described as locations linked to the Hamas groups. Details of that in this report by Amindao.
Speaking at a joint news conference with Russian Foreign Minister in Moscow on Wednesday, the UN chief highlighted the importance of respecting international law and committing to dialogue in response to escalating conflicts in the Middle East. Mr. Guterres said, efforts to foster unity and peaceful coexistence among people has been eroded by the growing division.
At this time of growing global divisions, respect for international law and the commitment to dialogue are more important than ever to maintain international peace and security, protect the health, welfare and dignity of people around the world, and guide collective action. Trust is an essential prerequisite for collective action, but it has been eroded by growing divisions.
Reports indicate that residents in Gaza are bracing for more devastation as militants fire one barrage of rockets after another, and Israel carries out waves of bone-rattling airstrikes, sending plumes of smoke rising into the air. Since Monday, Israel has toppled 3 high-rise buildings that is said to be house Hamas facilities after warning civilians to evacuate. The UN boss pointed out that unity within the UN Security Council is also crucial to solving the situation in the Middle East and other regional crises.
Unity of the Security Council is very important in relation to the Middle East, as in relation to all other crises that we are facing at the present moment all over the world, be it in Afghanistan or Libya or Yemen or Syria. It's very important, and more the members of the Security Council come together in order for international law to prevail and everybody to abide by it.
According to Guterres, the United Nations is committed to promoting all forms of dialogue to de-escalate tensions and revitalize the peace process in the Middle East. He also calls for the protection of the lives of civilians who are being killed in what they call unacceptable circumstances. Families have been holding funerals for some of the 83 people in Gaza and 7 people in Israel who have been killed since Monday. Gaza's Health Ministry said the death toll has climbed to 83 Palestinians, including 17 children and 7 women, with more than 480 people wounded. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Amindao.
Amindao reporting there as the UN chief calls for de-escalation in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine. Now, butchers at the busy Abuko abattoir have lamented the high cost of cows as Muslims prepare to observe Eid al-Fitr, commonly known as Karite. The butchers are blaming the foreign exchange rate for the high cost of cows, which eventually leaves customers with no choice but to buy meat at high price. Traditionally, meat is the much loved and should after a commodity during a festive period like Karite, with many considering it as part of the Eid celebration. Mariam Cham tells us more of that in this report.
Like in many festive seasons, huge number of people visit the Abuko abattoir to buy meat with intention of cooking it on the day of Eid as part of the celebration. Though not compulsory to cook meat on Eid day, it remains the much loved and sought after commodity during festive periods like Karite. The providers of the meat at the abattoir, known as the butchers, describe the high cost of cattle, which is making business very difficult for them. Most of these butchers travel to Senegal, Mali and other countries in the sub-region to buy cattle. With the fluctuating exchange rates, many of these butchers blame the high cost of cattle on the currency rates. Mandua, a butcher at the Abuko abattoir, says the meat business this year is very expensive, adding that all butchers are suffering the same losses as no profit is gained.
Averi mom ren dafa seer parce que kilo yapa bi ñu koy jaay 250.
Things are expensive this year because a kilo of meat and bone is $250 and steak is $300, which is really expensive. As butchers, we know that is expensive. I just bought a cow for $110,000 and the salesman would also blame it to the safer appreciation. We bought the cows from the abattoir, and I believe you when you say that you cannot buy at 10 and sell at 5. That is why the meat is expensive. Right now, if I should tell you how much I lost this year alone on meat selling, you will not believe me. And there is no butcher who will buy cows without a loss due to how expensive it is. Even if we are selling a kilo for $300, we will still have a loss.
Asan Fall, together with his fellow butchers, says Their business is not booming as it should be, citing the high cost of purchasing cows.
Well, business bi moom depuis ba corona bi commencé tàmbale ba léegi gisuñ suñu bopp ci business bi.
Since coronavirus began, we have not progressed in the business. Things are really expensive. Any cow you buy now, you will not gain profit from it. Sometimes you buy a cow for $180,000 to $170,000 and you lose an amount of $15,000 from it, which is a huge loss to us. We are just doing this so we can get good meat for our customers. Meat unborn is at $250 and for the steak, 1 kilo is $300. And as you can see, I don't buy this cow. I weigh it up and it weighs 1 kilo, which is $250. And I'm still maintaining that price for 1 kilo for $250. I only gain profit from the steak because there I can have $50 profit per kilo.
Omar Gay, also a butcher, blamed the high cost of meat on the currency exchange rates. As most of the cows comes from Senegal, he says the appreciation of the CFA affects the price.
Ndawal bi des na am because of gatti.
The meat is not enough because the cattle are expensive and also the price of a kilo has been increased. Customers too, if they want 5 kilo for $1,000, they can only have 4 and it is one of the challenges we are facing here. You know, most of the cattle are coming from Senegal and the CFA is expensive and these people cannot purchase it with high cost and come down and sell it to us at a cheaper price. This is also an issue.
A customer, Parjai, says even though the price of meat is expensive, he is not blaming the butchers for it.
Yapa bi abuko serna wadiga $300 per kilo.
Meat is expensive, truly speaking, with 1 kilo costing $300. But you cannot blame those selling the meat because the market itself is expensive. And they normally get the cattle from Senegal, others from Mali, and some other countries. And the rate of the CFA is at $450. You cannot expect the CFA to be higher than what the butcher bought those cattle for with tax and then come and sell a kilo for $250. Then he or she will not gain any profit. I support the 1 kilo for $300 and I think it is good.
Butchers at the Abuko Abattoir are selling a kilo of meat and bones for $250 and steak for $300. Meat is rich in protein and vitamin B12 and it's also a good source of iron. Protein obtained from meat is easily digested and thus absorbed quickly and effectively by the body. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Mariama Cham.
Despite the high cost of meat, I hope Gambians were able to buy meat to enjoy their correct celebrations. Now, up next to Tunisia we go because Tunisian authorities have expressed concern over the growing number of irregular migration amidst the impact of the COVID-19 global pandemic. Thousands of irregular migrants are said to be working in appalling conditions in different countries in the North African region with the hope of traveling to Europe for a better living condition. Now, despite measures put in place to cope irregular migrations, desperate migrants are even more determined to embark on the perilous journey. Here's more details of that in this report.
The Association of African Students and Trainees in Tunisia revealed that thousands of irregular migrants are working in deplorable conditions in many countries in the North African region. Tunisia and Libya are the first destinations for irregular migrants who are planning to reach European shores.
The COVID-19 pandemic has pushed African migrants into poverty. Many people accepted to stay in Tunisia and the region in general while working illegally and saving money until they found an irregular migration route. However, the general lockdown and the economic crisis have exacerbated this alarming situation.
The Tunisian Forum for Economic and Social Rights announced that authorities in Tunis thwarted 42 crossing operations and intercepted 409 Tunisian and sub-Saharan African migrants in April alone.
The majority of people who pay for irregular migration with all their savings chose death over life. It is unacceptable for Tunisia to become the favorite destination for Africans who are risking the dangerous sea crossing. It is a human tragedy. Unemployment and social precarity are increasing and the number of victims is rising, especially this year.
Amid reports of record increases in migrant deaths at sea, European Union countries, especially Italy, are building on cooperation with Tunisia and Libya to stem migration flows.
The agreements serve the interests of the Europeans. Our coast guards are not paid to protect the borders of Europe. Increasing control at sea does not stop the migration wave. The whole strategy must be reviewed because it failed to reduce irregular migration.
Since the beginning of 2021, Tunisian authorities prevented more than 3,500 migrants from reaching the Italian coast. The Interior Ministry has recorded that more children and women are risking their lives in the Mediterranean. The Tunisian Social Observatory has denounced Italy's strategy of outsourcing the containment and pushback of African migrants by boosting the capacity of the Tunisian and Libyan coast guards. Activists say Europe needs to put in place more practical social and economic measures to reduce irregular migration.
The news bulletin on Africa TV, and there's more news coming ahead. But from that report there in Tunisia, we will now take a break and come back shortly with the remainder of the story. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
The pride we take in our brand, the work we put into constantly change the landscape and elevate real estate in the Gambia, it's compared to none. From inception, our goal was to add value to the beautiful Gambian landscape. That's why we are proud innovators of community estates. Kololi Sands is an exceptional piece of work, tailored for ultimate convenience and luxury, to bring you an element of finesse that is rare but unique in its own. This is also our pride and joy, and we welcome you to the exquisite beauty right here in Kololi and right here on the waterfront. Kololi Sands, feel the ocean breeze at your doorstep.
This is Africa TV, and once again, many thanks for joining us. And now to the rest of the stories. Now, the Secretary General and leader of the United Democratic Party, lawyer Hussein Dabo, has cautioned leaders in the country to refrain from giving rhetoric that would bring division among Gambians as presidential elections draw nearer. He calls on Gambians to make informed choices in selection of leaders based on transparency, emphasizing the right to vote. Details of that in this report by Ndesise.
Leader of the opposition party takes advantage of his correct message to enjoin Gambians to continue their sense of generosity, respect for one another, and tolerance. He says time is prime for his fellow citizens to celebrate unity that binds them together and deviate from issues that would bring division.
Those of us in leadership positions should eschew rhetorics that fund polarization. A competitive plural democracy should not be divisive. We can vigorously contest each other's ideas and plans and lay them before the Gambian people, whose mandate we seek without devaluing our competitors or the public discourse.
Dabo urges citizens to use conscience and vision in selecting their leaders and support the process of free, fair, and transparent elections.
We are only 204 days away from a defining and consequential national elections, the first since the birth of the new Gambia in 2016. The Gambian people will again have an opportunity to choose among the clear and contrasting candidates and visions. It is the responsibility of every citizen to engage fully in the entire process that is free, fair, and transparent from registration to voting.
Ahead of the December polls for the presidency, lawyer Dabo opines that fairness in the registration will validate the rest of the electoral processes.
Only, and I emphasize, only qualified citizens should be registered legally at home and abroad. That candidates and campaigns would engage voters as stipulated by law, and that polls would be conducted freely and fairly. We must all strive to make the elections about the Gambian people and their urgent priorities.
The Eid al-Fitr, also known as the Feast of Korite, is an auspicious Muslim festival which is celebrated globally to mark the end of Ramadan. People wear festive clothes, prepare delicious food, and give charity from the very day to a few days later. Reporting for iAfrica TV, this is Omar Ahmadu Toure.
Yeah, that's our very own Omar Ahmad Toure reporting there as Osino Dabo, of course, speaks to Gambians in observance to the Eid al-Fitr celebrations, and of course, instead of this is a reporting there. Now, we move on to some other news, because as Muslims around the world celebrate the end of Ramadan, sales of Egyptian tradition and popular Eid threats has been low, thanks to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Usually, families would make their own sweets and during the festive period, but they now prefer the ready-made in different shops in the country. The locally made candies are in the North African country, but has not been making rounds among families compared before the outbreak of COVID-19. And here's more details of that in this report.
The sugar-coated sweet is the main reward after a month of fasting during Ramadan. Shops prepare for it from early on.
We begin preparations a month before. The first 10 days of Ramadan, we start preparations and buying the ingredients. We then begin production, and in the last 10 days of Ramadan, we start selling the kak for the Eid.
Traditionally, families bake it at home, but now most prefer ready-made deliveries.
We bring flour, the kak flavor and fragrance, ghee and sesame. We mix it thoroughly until it is blended together. We then add water, sugar and yeast and mix it all. When it holds itself and is strong, we make the familiar rounded shape and then heat it in the oven for 25 to 30 minutes.
In the last 2 years, COVID has had its effects on the demand for the popular sweet.
Before the coronavirus, demand was huge. Last year was tough because the curfew was at 5 p.m, so sales dropped. This year sales are a bit better, but we hope it would improve in the future.
But one thing's for sure, it will remain a main component in these annual festivities.
And from that report there in Egypt, Cairo, next to Kampala. Now, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has described his country as the best home for democracy and good governance. Museveni made this remark shortly after swearing in for his new presidential term, which was attended by delegations from 33 countries and 11 heads of states and government. Here's more of that in this report.
The 76-year-old Ugandan president was sworn for his sixth term in office, following the recent presidential elections in which he won by 58%. As one of Africa's longest-serving presidents, Yoweri Museveni took over leadership in a military operation in 1986. His main challenger, Bobi Wine, still claims that the January election was rigged. Taking his oath in the capital Kampala, the Ugandan leader said, boosted of the development of democratic structure for the East African country.
It is therefore quite comic and laughable to hear of some actors in the world giving us lectures about democracy. You give me a lecture about democracy? What are your own credentials? We designed this system not from the air-conditioned rooms, but from the jungles of our country, where we lived with the people in their hearts in those days, for much of the 16 years of the resistance, 1971 to 1986. We built this system for our people. We neither seek nor need any approbation from anybody outside Uganda.
President Museveni called on his fellow African leaders to work together to move Africa forward. He acknowledges that Africa, like any other continent in the world, needs a center of gravity.
This is the moment the Ugandans and the other Africans need to answer the question: is this generation of African leaders determined to build a Latin America in Africa or a United States of Africa in Africa? We must, where we can, build a center of gravity for the African race. The African race must have a center of gravity.
The president described the presence of the heads of states and African leaders as a sign of brotherhood. Yoweri Museveni has been sworn in for his 6th term as president. As police surrounded the home of Bobi Wine, his main opposition rival, who described the inauguration as a sham. His victory in January was overshadowed by a pre-election crackdown, with opposition candidates forcibly prevented from campaigning and dozens of protesters killed by the security forces. Reporting for iAfrica News, I am Daisy.
All right, Daisy reporting there as Yoweri Museveni begins another new term in office as the president of Uganda. Well, viewers, that's all for now. But of course, for more details on this and other stories, as always, as ever, you can visit on our website, onafrica.tv. But for now, though, many thanks for the privilege of your company. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and stay safe. Of course, do have a very, very pleasant day. Enjoy your quality divinity. Bye for now.
tey moom dama ne